Hi, my name is Peter Nelson. I am president of Nelson Insurance Advisors. We specialize in using non-woke Catholic fraternal insurance companies in order to protect our clients and members, whether it be in regards to life insurance or retirement planning. We have over 23 years of experience in the insurance industry, and we want to do business with people that believe the way that we believe. So please reach out to us at 423-793-2613, or you can find us on our website at nelsonplan.com. God bless and Godspeed.
I don't know about you, but I am at the point where I don't really care what the bishops have to say about secular politics anymore. And I know that's not a great place to be as a Catholic, but they tend to put their foot in their mouth at every given opportunity, to the point where they will release a seemingly innocuous statement and I will at least will sit there and say, okay, what's the catch? Where is the punchline to this? When are you going to come against the clearly popular position that the people of this country have for your own aggrandizement? Where's the bottom line in this for you? And we have a great example of that today, because we have a seemingly innocuous statement from the bishops that comes hot on the heels of we'll say, some bad news for a bishop in one diocese. But also, I found an American bishop who, on the issue of immigration, actually says the right things, which means he'll probably never get a promotion because he is speaking the actual truth of what the church teaches on this. Let's get to these stories, though. You might be aware that President Trump signed an executive order beginning the process of ending the U.S. Department of Education. And this has the media worked up into a lather, because the U.S. education system is the centerpiece of propaganda for ensuring that future generations of Americans are brought up to be obedient civilians for the new system the left has been building. The Department of Education was established in 1979, and since that time, U.S. outcomes in schools have plummeted. The media have come up with all kinds of novel metrics to show that's not true, but it is true. We've all seen it. Those of us who are relatively young, like myself, who went through the public education system, can tell you that the education system that I went through 30, 40 years ago is not the same public education system that they want me to send my kids to. And I'm not going to. We homeschool them for good reason. But the American education system is the laughingstock of the developed world, and our educational outcomes have continued to slide for 45 years since the department was first launched. Since the president signed an executive order axing the Department of Education as a response to this, and I hate to be the one to have to break this news to you, for those of you who, like me, want to see that abominable department go away, it's going to actually take an act of Congress to finalize, which is why I don't expect this to necessarily go anywhere, since the U.S. Senate is hung up on the filibuster, which, by the way, as an aside, if anyone watching this is a staffer for Senate Majority Leader Thune, I have a simple fix for the filibuster. Don't get rid of the filibuster. Just make the senators who invoke the filibuster actually stand up and filibuster, meaning speak endlessly until the Senate gives in to their demand, or until the person trying to filibuster the whatever is at hand gets tired of speaking. But don't get rid of the filibuster. Just make the person launching the filibuster actually filibuster. That will take care of this entire problem. Make them get on camera and tell America why they are against a piece of legislation. And that will give your party all the ad footage you need for campaign ads against Democrats in the 2026 midterm elections. Or, if they're smart, they'll stop invoking the filibuster, and we can actually have the business of the people done again. That is my way of taking care of this problem. Anyway, you'd think the U.S. bishops wouldn't care about this U.S. Department of Education issue one way or another, because Catholic schools don't get any kind of funding help from the U.S. government. It takes, for Catholic colleges to get even Pell Grants and student loans, they have to give in so much on their mission as a Catholic school that the best Catholic schools in the U.S. are completely privately funded and do not accept federal grant dollars, including Pell Grants and student loans. If you go look at the Newman list, which are the list of the top Catholic colleges in the country, none of the colleges that have like marquee football teams or are historically iconic Catholic colleges in America are on that list. They tend to be very small, and you either pay out of pocket to when you get in, or your tuition is covered through the generosity of their supporters. But as a general rule, they don't accept student loans and grants because Department of Education funding, which is where those money come from, comes with a lot of strings attached that undermine the mission of Catholic schools. And so I'm not sure why the U.S. bishops have an opinion on this, but they do. And here's a piece of advice for the U.S. bishops. Not every public policy position taken by the new administration needs your input. Otherwise, you start to look like the Democratic Party at prayer, which was what the U.S. bishops used to be called back in the 60s. They used to be called the Democratic Party at prayer. You're not doing anything to shed that perception. So we go here to Catholic News Agency for this headline. U.S. bishops respond to Trump executive order designed to eliminate Department of Education. And yes, once again, it's going to take an act of Congress to finalize this. It just is going to. Yes, the Department of Education was established by executive order, but Congress finished the job later. But the bishops have an opinion. Don't know why. Again, they don't need to chime in on everything. I mean, the next thing you're going to hear them chiming in on is like Greenland politics or whatever. Anyway, here's what they have to say. Quote, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops responded to the new order stating that it, quote, does not take a position on the institutional structure of government agencies, but the Catholic Church teaches that parents are the primary educators of their children and should have the freedom and resources to choose an educational setting best suited for their child. The conference supports public policies that affirm this, and we support the positive working relationships that the dioceses, parishes, and independent schools have with their local public school system partners. As this education order is implemented, it is important to ensure that students of all backgrounds in both public and non-public schools, especially those with disabilities or from low-income backgrounds, will continue to receive the resources they need, the statement concluded. While private schools do not receive federal funds, they often work with the Department of Education to receive benefits from the department's taxpayer-funded programs. The department does not give directly to private institutions, but rather to programs the schools may utilize to support their students. And also, if you've been paying attention to the Catholic charities story, then you've probably heard me mention that the way that the Vatican and the way that Catholic organizations have been bought and paid for by the U.S. government is not just through direct money from the government, but sometimes nonprofits, including Catholic schools, will contract with another nonprofit organization to carry out a program. And that nonprofit organization got its money from the US government, or that nonprofit got it from another nonprofit who got it from the US government, or that nonprofit got it from another nonprofit who got it from the US government. You can actually chart the flow of money on this using a lot of these now AI-driven data analysis tools looking at the federal government's grant dollar websites for USAID and other things. Federal money does find its way into these schools, and that's why the bishops are chiming in here. But at the surface level, it doesn't look like they should, because aside from maybe getting a few specific programs funded by governments, they're generally independent. And the best Catholic schools are completely independent because they don't want anything to do with this stuff. Jonathan Butcher, a senior research fellow for the Center of Education Policy at the Heritage Foundation, told Catholic News Agency that the new order should not have an impact on Catholic schools. It will not prevent students in public or private schools from receiving the resources they need. He said the president has said in his executive order that all the essential services will continue. The department's two biggest programs for K-12 education are the Individuals with Disabilities Act and the Title I program. Butcher, a supporter of the order, said the president has committed to keeping programs for children in disadvantaged backgrounds or disadvantaged areas, end quote. Now, there's an interesting number that goes along with this U.S. Department of Education slashing. A lot of the opponents of this will say that public schools, K through 12, are under threat. They're not. 71% of the U.S. Department of Education's money that is given out goes to Pell Grants, student loan programs, and direct payments to universities. You know, those same universities are subverting the country and trying to destroy the future of this country by promoting pure ideology. That's just a fact. It's how they get their money, is mostly from the government, mostly from the Department of Education. And for those of you worried about student loans, that as student loans are being moved over to the U.S. Treasury Department, and pretty soon you'll be able to go back into your student loan payment portal and reapply for your income-driven repayment plans and all that. In fact, it may actually be open. I need to check myself. So that's how it works, though. But the bishops, for whatever reason, are wading into politics again, and it's a really stupid thing to do. Most of the time, they don't take positions that the people want, that people agree with. So what's going to happen? We tune them out. I don't want to know what a bishop has to say about every little thing the US government does. I don't. I understand why they chime in on migration aside from the money, because you were talking about human dignity and other kinds of things. And so there might be a place for them to prudentially say the US government has every right to expel those who aren't supposed to be here, but they need to remember they're dealing with human beings and they need to afford them some level of respect while they're enforcing the laws. If they said that, most people would not have a problem with it. But that's not what they say. What they do is they defend their money. And that's how they always do. Now, this statement from the bishops comes just as a major victory was announced for those of us who don't want the name Catholic being used to subvert the United States. And this is not good news for a very specific bishop because, well, you'll see. Headline from News from the States. Catholic Charities Refugee Resettlement Program in mid-Missouri to close after 14 years. Sat on this one for a couple days, but a Catholic Charities will still operate in the diocese in this story, but their main program that is coming under federal scrutiny is closing. It's lived around 14 years, and that's an interesting number because you'll note that when we talk about Catholic Charities, USAID, they were receiving small amounts of money relative to where they were, but then it was about 14 years ago when that funding exploded in the Obama administration. 14 years ago, back in 2011. That's when the money started to explode, when the Catholic Charities and other Catholic organizations and other Christian groups started having the gospel message essentially turned into a blunt force instrument for exacting a change in this country fundamentally. And Catholic Charities in Missouri is closing. Here are the details. The Central and Northern Missouri chapter of Catholic Charities will end its refugee resettlement program March 31st. In an email to supporters, Executive Director Litz Main said the nonprofit had to end the program due to lack of federal funding. We deeply appreciate your partnership and shared commitment to serving those in need, Main said in the email. As we navigate this transition, we welcome opportunities to collaborate in new ways to continue supporting refugee families in our region. The cuts come from a federal level after President Donald Trump suspended the U.S. refugee admissions program and halted all funding for agencies that support refugees. Although the executive order was blocked by a federal judge in February, local resettlement programs still face a lack of federal funds. There is no indication when the program will resume, and the case is expected to face an appeal from the Trump administration to the Supreme Court. Catholic Charities has provided food assistance, disaster relief, and family services for refugees for 14 years through the program. As an aside, that's not all they do. They also help them evade law enforcement and all these other, and how to access government systems and all sorts of other things. It's hence why subversion. The program stopped accepting new refugees earlier this year because of uncertainty about the future, according to an emailed statement. The organization has worked with partner agencies, those are your NGOs, to have those groups take over providing support to refugees. That transition will be complete by March 31st, according to the statement. We are proud to have welcomed and walked alongside so many who now call Missouri home, and we remain steadfast in our commitment to supporting those families through our partner agencies, Main said in a statement Wednesday. Catholic Charities said in the statement it will continue to focus on its mission to support those in need in the Diocese of Jefferson City. In other words, Catholic Charities will still be around. They just won't be doing that work. And while that organization exists, if you get an administration in the future who is quite happy to pick up where things left off before Trump came in, Catholic Charities will be right back there to keep that evil work going. Now, I've gotten emails from viewers in the Diocese of Jefferson City who have said that Bishop McKnight isn't exactly happy about this for obvious reasons, and that he's urging laity to give money to Catholic Charities and Catholic Relief Services for their Lenten alms. Let me know in the comments if you've heard that. If you're in Missouri, especially if you've heard that, let me know in the comments or in an email if you want. Address in the description box below. Please just send me important emails, not a lot. I've got 2,000 emails in my inbox right now, so I can't answer emails at all. But let me know if you've seen that in Jefferson, Missouri, or if you're elsewhere in the country and you're seeing this. I've already gotten some comments from people saying, yeah, their bishop or their priest or their parish newsletter is telling people, give to Catholic Charities, give to Catholic Relief Services, all these things. That is a major part of the push in their diocese during this time. I have also not now. Good news though, not every American bishop is in the wrong on this. I want to highlight one bishop who clearly understands what's at stake. So again, not every bishop is on the side of evil on this. We go to kfgo.com, which is a news website out of Fargo, North Dakota. Headline: Fargo Catholic bishop calls Trump immigration policy drastic, but in some cases necessary. A nuanced take from a bishop. Is that allowed? I didn't think that was allowed anymore with the McElroys and Cardinal Supiches basically making it sound like anybody who supports what the government is doing is going to spend eternity in perdition, being licked by flames because they hold to what the church has always said about this issue. It's amazing to see this. Here's what they has to say. And by the way, this bishop, because he said this, will probably not be getting a promotion anytime soon to a bigger diocese. But if he's a good bishop, he doesn't care about that anyway. Fargo's Roman Catholic bishop is speaking out about the sweeping immigration changes being made by the Trump administration. Diocese of Fargo Bishop John Fulda says that while the church has never advocated for wide open borders because nations need to protect their citizens, he adds that the actions taken by the White House in recent weeks are not business as usual. I think in some ways they've taken a very drastic approach to curtailing any kind of immigration into the country, including refugees who are, some of whom have already been vetted and have already been approved actually of entering the country, he said. I'm not going to take sides, one or the other. I just think that you could make the case that they're taking drastic approach, but they're also perhaps doing what hasn't been done, perhaps needs to be done with respect to protecting our borders. He remains optimistic that the new restrictions will eventually be eased. I hope that a time will come when there will be a relaxation of that, so that those who are simply in need of safety and looking for a better life can simply be admitted into our country once again, but that has to be in accord with our laws, Fulda said. End quote. Amazing. Let's take from a bishop. Again, is that allowed in the church today? Let me know in the comments. Do you think that's allowed in the church today? I don't think that is, and I don't think he's going to be getting any promotions anytime soon or being invited to any special private events among some of the insider crowd bishops. But that's what it is. Now, let's pivot here because many of you are going to note, I mentioned this at the beginning of my live stream yesterday. Francis was released from the hospital yesterday. Yes, Pope Francis's long journey in the hospital is over. He has been released and sent back to Rome, according to official reports, for convalescence, meaning he's going to be spending the next 2 months recovering, continuing his antibiotic treatments and assisted breathing and all the other things, but that he has progressed enough, according to official reports, to go back home. And there's a few implications for this. And the first is that this will be the first time we haven't had a reigning Roman pontiff participating in the Easter blessings. You won't have the Ubi et Orbi or any of those things during Easter this year. That's a first since there was at least a first since there has been a interregnum at Easter, when I don't know when the last time that was offhand. We go to, in case you haven't seen this footage yet, this is from Catholic Sat, who posted this on X yesterday. This is Pope Francis coming to the window. Not the best footage, but like what do you expect out of the Vatican official media? Although you think they could afford better cameras, but there he is, not exactly looking very good. And what I'm about to show you will make it look like he's doing even that. This is even better. He's clearly frail, in need of your prayers. Pray for him as your conscience dictates. But you notice that when he's doing this, he's just waving. And he's, pointing to somebody in the crowd, smiling. And then the person comes in, leans in, whispers to him, and basically says, do you ask if he wants to speak? And here, let's.
Grazie a tutti. E vedo questa signora con I fiori gialli.
You can barely hear him. Even if I were to, I had the volume cranked as loud as it'll go for that clip, and you could barely hear him. He's speaking at a whisper. And then after that, of course, there's a woman in yellow flowers that somebody's started speculating on. That is not that important, but people were quite happy. And there's actually a fairly sizable crowd out there to see him. And he waves, And he does all that, and then it's over. He's going to be someone's going to lean in here in just a moment and tell him right there that time to go, because, and pay attention when you see this. Sorry for those of you listening on an audio only thing later, but see, there he is leaning and saying, basically, it's time to go. And that's when he starts giving his apostolic benediction. And he looks like he got winded just doing that. So for those of you saying he's not around anymore, yes, he is. He's very clearly around, and he's not doing well. He needs your prayers as an act of charity. Our Lord told us commanded us to pray for everybody, basically, including our enemies. And I don't necessarily count him as our enemy, but you've got to pray for him. It's the decent thing to do. I wouldn't want to have to stand before our Lord someday and explain why I didn't pray for him, knowing that there was an ailing man with the whole world watching. But that's not the only one here. Also from Catholic Sat. And I actually don't like showing you these images. I really don't. I get no joy in showing you these at all. But it says, it does seem that Pope Francis will now require long-term oxygen therapy, and appeared frail, cyanosed, and incredibly breathless when addressing the crowd outside the hospital without it. That's Francis. Taken from, pretty sure that's the Pope Mobile. Yeah, I get no joy in his condition, and I would hope and pray that you don't either. He says, it's uncertain whose decision it was to appear publicly without oxygen nasal cannulae. I'm certain it wasn't the medical team. I actually think that this was probably Francis himself who made that decision. I can't imagine anybody would overrule him on this. I'm certain that was his decision to appear that way. Whatever else you may think about him, he probably wants to appear strong to make people feel better about the situation he's in and to project strength. Because I told you recently, there are cardinals opening campaigning for the next conclave, even though there isn't a conclave officially announced, because he's not resigning. I am going to work on something for you for next week, I think, about what Malachi Martin called the resignation protocol. And the resignation protocol was something they'd been pushing since the 80s or even earlier. He actually, I think, mentioned it in his book, The Final Conclave, which was the first of his faction books. Faction meaning 100% real. He just changes the names and puts in a little bit of fiction in there to make it a storytelling narrative. But otherwise, it's real. Everything in there, all the facts, everything in there is fact. And in The Final Conclave, I believe the first time they bring in the concept of the resignation protocol. You see it in Windswept House. The entire plot of Windswept House is detailing how a group of bishops are trying to force John Paul II to resign the papacy. And that the resignation protocol has since become reality. Like day one in 2013, Francis signed his own resignation letter that would go into effect on the condition that he was incapacitated. Hence why you've seen this resignation talk from Rome. It's hence why Cardinal Pietro Parolin, who is campaigning behind the scenes to be the next pope, publicly has said Francis is not going to resign, because he's playing both sides. He's showing himself to be dutifully loyal while also expecting a conclave soon. Amidst all the politicking going on, Francis has to show strength. I don't know if he was successful or not. I don't think he was. Maybe you will think he was when he was showing up there, but he was clearly out of breath at the end. And those pictures, there were going to be pictures of him in the media with the breathing tubes. It was just going to happen. As soon as he got into that car, which did not have tinted windows, it was going to happen. But that is Francis, ladies and gentlemen. He has been released, and he's in Vatican City right now, back at Santa Marta. Chesterton's just says, I think it would be worse for the church if he retired. And you are 100% correct. Popes should not retire, except under extreme circumstances. A few have over the course of the history of the church. It wasn't just Celestine V and Benedict XVI. A few others have done it too. But before Benedict, it had been many centuries. And the last time it had happened, a lot of the times it happened was because of having to do with the Great Western Schism, when there are multiple claimants to the throne of Peter at the same time. It's exceedingly rare. It should be exceedingly rare. It should not ever be a normal thing. We do not need to secularize the office anymore. term limits for a pope. Sure, maybe in our lifetimes we will see a time when a pope is essentially unconscious and being reduced to surviving with assistance, professional assistance of some kind. Maybe then you can come up with some kind of policy for vacating the papal see, since you need a visible head of the church who is actively ministering the church. But beyond that, you don't need anything like this. This entire debate is the result of modernity in a good way. No one decries the fact that medical advancements have done a great deal to make it so people have greater longevity, but it does come with a cost. And one of those could be you have a pontiff who is incapacitated but alive. What does the church do then? You can only have it be run by your bureaucratic staff of Vatican City for so long. Traditionalist Catholics says disgraceful politicking for the next conclave while the Holy Father is still active. Well, I did remind you that both sides are already taking their positions. A few days ago, I did a live stream about this, and the better bishops, the good cardinals, are already some mysterious figure calling himself Demos II, Demos I being was Cardinal Pell. Demos II has been circulating letters to the cardinals trying to get them ready for the conclave. The other side's doing it too. Whether we have a conclave in 2025 or 2029 or somewhere in between, we don't know. I don't think we're done with Francis yet. Pray that he receives the graces he needs before he stands before our Lord. The same prayer you would want somebody to pray for you, because there's nothing evil about wanting somebody to, when their time comes, to stand before our Lord in his friendship. Do these cardinals have no shame? When for many of them, power is all they care for, when their entire careers have been in the Roman Curia, or they spent their entire careers doing whatever it took to become more influential in their countries and on the international stage, you have to wonder how much the gospel plays into what they do. I would much rather have a bishop like Fulda. I don't know anything else about what he stands for at all. Traditional liturgy versus Novus Ordo, Traditionis Custodes, no idea. But he doesn't seem like the kind who is self-aggrandizing in a ladder climber. I could be wrong about that, but usually you don't take a nuanced position on the hot button topic of the day that the rest of the bishops have taken the opposite position on, if that's the case. And I would rather have a bishop like that, and have a bishop like that maybe become pope, which won't happen, but somebody like that become pope rather than the alternative. And at this point, you have all the conservative bishops and cardinals all speaking out about what the next pope needs to do. Bishop Schneider had something recently. I'll have it for you tomorrow or in the next few days. But they've all taken positions. They're all politicking already to some degree or another. It is, as Novus Ordo Watch pointed out, the Francis show is basically over, as they called it. Meaning, whether Francis likes it or not, the cardinals are already beginning to prepare for a church without him. And what comes next, who knows? I know there's a lot of people who say, well, there won't be another pope, St. Malachi prophecy, whatever. What if the St. Malachi prophecy is being misread? I presented to you like a year ago the alternate reading of that. Probably have to do it again soon, I think, because the alternate reading of that has us with 5 more popes left before our Lord comes again, which could mean another century. I don't know. Let me know what you think about this in the comments, though. As Justin Chess says, that's it. These are no different than career politicians, these cardinals, and that is at the heart of the crisis in the church. Cardinals and bishops wear red for a very, very good reason. It is because they are shepherds, and they are expected to, if need be, to lay down their lives for the church. We don't expect politicians to do the same for the political bodies they represent. Usually in those kinds of crises where that kind of thing is expected, they're the first to flee. Something to think about with many of these cardinals. That's why you should be praying for your bishop, that they have the intestinal fortitude, the spine to do their duty, even if it costs them everything. And in some parts of the world, being a priest can cost them everything. Go look what's happening in Africa these days, especially in the more remote parts of Africa. All right, folks, thanks very much for tuning in today. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.